It's a small town in the German part of Bohemia. They were originally of Czech background, although my father was partly Jewish. After the Munich Agreement, September 1938, it became quite obvious that we couldn't stay. We lost all our possessions overnight. We already had made contact with relatives in Canada, and we arrived in Canada as penniless refugees August 1939, just several weeks, 2 or 3 weeks before the war started. The first impression I had of Canada coming up the St. Lawrence River between Quebec and Montreal, and you could see the highway there, and the whole place was, by my standards, crowded with cars. I had never known this. So many cars on the road. Oh, and we settled in Prescott, which was just a little town, and the people were just so bloody kind to us. It was just amazing. Particularly after the Germans attacked Russia, they were all over the place in Europe, and I realized I had to join the army. When I arrived at the recruiting station in Ottawa, I didn't have the slightest idea what I was going to do in the army. I didn't know. I'm standing in the line at Bletchley Park. They asked you, do you have any special qualifications? And I said, for everybody in the Cow Palace to hear, I'm a typewriter. I didn't know there was such a thing as a typist. I said, I'm a typewriter. Well, it brought down the bloody house. Behind me in the lineup was a man called Johnny Lauer. When he heard that I spoke German, shorthand typing, he alerted a signals intelligence unit which he was part of. I was accosted within 2 or 3 days while I was in Ottawa by people who tested my typing and my German. They were quite impressed. And so I ended up in a signals intelligence unit right then and there. And this unit was earmarked to go overseas almost immediately. So by the time I landed in Glasgow on a troop ship on the 17th of October, just figure how many days I had in the military. I didn't even know how to salute, for Christ's sake. I didn't know anything about it. At that time, there wasn't a single Canadian officer, other rank, or soldier who had the slightest idea what signals intelligence is all about. There was no such thing in the Canadian Army. We had to learn from scratch. Now, do you know the difference between my unit and Bletchley Park? They were a static unit handling cipher, strategic level information. The signals intelligence unit, which I belonged to, which was just in the process of becoming operational, and our job was to travel on the battlefield, to participate on the battlefield, to intercept enemy signals 2 or 3 miles away. We were a mobile unit, and we learned on the job. And 3 years, we did nothing but intercept German traffic. And so by the time we landed in Normandy in June 1944, we knew half the units which were opposing us. And they had 2 sources of signals intelligence. One is traffic coming over the air from a transmitter on the other side, and direction finding. Very elementary by today's standards. So that the signals, the intelligence has 2 functions. One is to find out what he's doing, and the other function is to prevent them from finding out what we're doing. The main traffic was Morse, and then what we call RTOC, voice, and RTOC, Morse in code or plain language. We were given for about 3 months, once a week, a script where 1 or 2 of our teams had to go out and were told where to go and send these messages. And don't bloody well do anything else. We didn't know what it was. It was a deception, part of the deception plan. It's only after the war I found out what we were doing. We were not code breakers because we were not that talented. But you can get what we call traffic analysis. That means you don't have to read what he's saying, but you know from the type of message what kind of message it is. It's a strength return. I give you an example. 21 Panzer Division, which featured very largely in the response of the invasion, but we heard them before, was part of the Africa Corps, and they must have brought along their signal master, because the same procedure he used in Africa, signing off his message, was used in Northwest Europe. But we had listened to some of these units so long now that it was difficult for them to conceal who they were. And we said, that's 21 Panzer. Well, it was exciting. It was exciting. We landed in Normandy, and we can tell pretty well where each these units are. The headquarters of the German Panzer Group under a man called Geyer from Schwettenberg, a lieutenant general who had 3 Panzer divisions under his command, was going to launch a counterattack. Because of signals intelligence, they pinpointed that headquarters. They pinpointed the building. They bombed the building on the 8th of June. And a counterattack which they had planned for the next 2 or 3 days couldn't go. We could tell from the signal traffic which unit is about to surrender or which unit really thinks they're in trouble. We used to call this HH messages, Heil Hitler messages. We classified this cover your ass message. You see, they're just going to surrender or are really at the end of their performance, and they want to make sure that our control or headquarters knows we're still loyal to Hitler. HH message will show they're in trouble. A man in the billbox says, I'm surrounded by 30 tanks. Well, and I'm out of ammunition. What am I supposed to do? And his orders were break out. But we had a cluster bomb come down. You know what a cluster bomb is? It goes and it just spreads. It was over. And my radio, which was beside me, I had a little battle radar. I had a direct hit with just a bunch of metal, and my tent was all shredded. I hate to say this. I was safer there than I would have been walking in New York. When the war was over, they still had a functioning high command under Dönitz. And he said, Macht Schluss, the war is over, we have lost it, no more fighting. The Germans obeyed. There was nothing. You could walk on anywhere, you could walk into the German barracks, hundreds of Germans there, but there was no sabotage of any sort, there was no resistance of any sort in Germany, none. I was employed for a while as an interrogator of war criminals. We were separating people who were looking always for tattoo marks, you know. For example, in Belsen, I went to Belsen when we had 22,000 corpses in Belsen. I saw them. 22,000 corpses, all women, old men, children. There wasn't a soldier amongst them. And the mayor of that town was 4 miles away, had never heard of it. Bull. Well, I was looking for relatives. A young woman, 18 years old. And everybody wants to know why I'm still a liberal. And I always say, listen, they made me a flaming officer of the Canadian Army. I wasn't even a citizen of Canada. Only a liberal country like Canada. So is there any wonder that I'm a flag waver for crying out loud?